Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is refusing to call the situation at the southern border a crisis, but the Border Patrol chief says it is overwhelming. According to Customs and Border Protection data, U.S. apprehensions at the southern border hit a record high of 2.3 million last year, and this year is already on pace to match that. Joining us now is former Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Mayorkas served as your undersecretary. Why is he refusing to call this a crisis? I mean, if you take a look at what's going on, how is that not a crisis?
Elizabeth, in my judgment, it is a crisis. I said 4 years ago, when the numbers were at about 4,000 a day during the Trump administration, that was a crisis. We've seen numbers of 4,000 and higher. The good news is for the last 2 or 3 months, the numbers have been down. January, February, the number of apprehensions on our southern border has decreased. But I know that the administration is very focused on what will happen when the Title 42 authority ends in May, and they're thinking through their options very, very carefully. This situation is challenging on a number of levels. First of all, it's much bigger than it was when I was in office. Because,
how much?
Well, the numbers, over 2 million apprehensions in a year. When I was in office, we'd see numbers ranging at about 400,000, 300,000 a year. The source countries that list is much longer.
So it's quadrupled?
It's quadruples, and it includes Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela now, in addition to the Central American countries. Plus, the smugglers know how to move numbers of migrants in much larger volumes now. Ultimately, the lesson I learned when I was in office, we can do things on our southern border to enhance enforcement, to ratchet up enforcement, sending people back. But as long as the underlying push factors persist in the source countries, as long as it is as bad as it is, poverty, violence, corruption, they're going to keep coming. And so we need to focus on trying to address those problems in the source countries. I know President Biden believes that because he and I used to talk about it when he was vice president and I was secretary.
You have said that the application process for asylum for these migrants takes way too long, on average 6 years.
Yes.
But you have also said that we need to raise the qualifications. We need to make it harder. Not everybody who's getting asylum should be getting asylum. That must be at least a little politically unpopular.
The reality is that there are aspects of our broken system that serve as magnets for illegal immigration.
That it's too easy?
Well, you've noted that on the front end of an asylum application process, the bar to establish what we call credible fear is relatively low, though the ultimate bar to obtain asylum in this country is much higher. And in between are years for the process to play itself out. And migrants know that when they come here. And so the backlog in the system is itself a magnet for immigration, which is why Congress and the executive branch really do need to get together on this.
Well, today there's a congressional delegation led by Senator Kristen Sinema going down to tour the border yet again. And while I think it's great that these congressmen are down there seeing this problem firsthand, as our NewsNation reporters, see every single day when they're down there, shouldn't they be on Capitol Hill working out some sort of meaningful reform, immigration reform? How many years have we been waiting for Congress to do this?
The answer is yes. Unfortunately, the political incentives on this issue are all wrong. On the right, the incentive is to yell at the left and talk about the Biden administration being open borders. And on the left, they're screaming at people on the right, saying you're inhumane, you want to deport everybody, it's contrary to our values. And so the political incentives are all wrong. There are no political incentives for those in Washington to come together, compromise, work across the aisle, and craft comprehensive immigration reform. We almost had it 9 years ago, but it slipped away.
In the meantime, the desperation is building up along the border. When we see that report from our reporter, Jorge Ventura, I mean, these migrants are being locked in buildings. They're sleeping on streets. They're dying because somebody sets a fire because they're upset. I mean, it is actually chaos. It's heartbreaking. All these people shouldn't be in the United States, but the suffering along the border by this.
The conditions on Mexico's northern border with us is terrible. When you have this kind of backlog of people waiting to get into the United States and the facilities there are not ideal, what happened at that migrant center was a real tragedy. But something like that, regrettably, is bound to happen.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.